Hello, hello, here we are. It's a pleasure to have you all here this evening it's very exciting because this is our first Swift Wednesday since March. We've had a few meetings and mixings, but this is the first official event with Wednesday since March. So welcome here tonight, all of you that are joining us for this panel, Self-Care and Mental Wellness for the Film and TV Community. For those who don't know me, I'm Michelle Faturi. I'm co-vice president of Kansas City Women in Film and TV. And before I get started, I have just quick, very brief announcements, very exciting announcements. If you would like to become a member of KC WIFT, or if you are already a member and your membership is about to expire, tonight you can join us for only $15 for a whole year of membership. Our regular rate is $35, but tonight is only $15. So all the way from now until midnight, we're gonna have a link. I think we're gonna be able to send the link to you via chat today, but we'll also post it in the Facebook event. So if you're interested, if you wanna support our organization, join us tonight and become a member. Other thing that's making us very excited, our next WIFT Wednesday in October will happen in October 14th and will be a Halloween special. We're very excited about it. The final details are being worked. You are gonna learn all about it in the next week or so. But the big difference is that it's not gonna be a virtual event. It's gonna be an in-person event. Also the first one we have since March. So we would like to offer that for those who really like to have in-person experiences, but of course we will follow all the best practices to keep everyone safe. We'll be very COVID aware, but that will be October 14th, and we'll be really happy to see many of you there joining us for Halloween. But back to our theme tonight, self-care and mental wellness. In the past years, mental wellness and mental health, it's a growing concern in our industry, the TV, film, and entertainment industry. And with the pandemic this year, with job insecurity, health insecurity, everything that we all have been through and have been overcoming on a daily basis in our industry that is already a stressful environment, we realized that our organization not only should support you in your professional goals in your career development, but also offer other type of support. And we think that mental wellness is very important to make sure we all go through this the least harm possible. So we're very happy that this panel is happening tonight, and we hope that it kind of opens the door for a less biased discussion on mental health in our industry. But enough talking from me. Let's get started. I would love to introduce you to our host and moderator for this evening. She is KC WIFT's co-secretary and a licensed therapist, Sarah Wilper. Sarah, that's all with you now.
Okay, thank you so much, Michelle. It is such a privilege to be here tonight and to be able to host this event. And we have coordinated with women in the community and other professionals to bring you information on mental wellness and self-care during this very trying time that we're all going through. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And I'm going to introduce our first presenter. That is Katrina Matthews. Hey, Katrina.
Hi, Sarah. Nice to see you.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to tell our audience a little bit about you. Katrina Matthews is an LMFT, which stands for Licensed Marital and Family Therapist. And she's currently working at the Metropolitan Organization to Counter Sexual Assault, also known as MOCSA, because that's a mouthful. MOCSA is a little easier to say. This is located in Kansas City, Missouri. She earned her Master's of Arts in Marital and Family Therapy at the California School of Psychology in San Diego. Katrina has over 14 years of experience working in social services and mental health counseling. She's worked at agencies in California and Kansas, as well as developing a private counseling practice in New Mexico. Katrina is passionate about holistic self-care to maintain the balance between the demands of daily life with one's physical and emotional well-being. Thank you, Katrina. You are the perfect person to start us out tonight and to talk about some of the signs and symptoms of depression and anxiety. So it's one of the most common mental health issues that we see.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Sarah. And I'm so glad to be here. I'm so glad all of you could join us today. And I hope that some of the information that I'll share with you tonight and that our other panelists will share will be helpful to you. I want to acknowledge many eons ago, I worked at WGBH in Boston for the help desk for Marketplace. And so there might be some folks in the audience tonight who are members or non-members who are already familiar with this. So if that's the case, take what's helpful, leave what's not. I want to start off by acknowledging we are just in such a challenging time right now, and talking about mental health without acknowledging what's happening globally and nationally and locally just doesn't feel responsible. So of course the pandemic is happening. It's not looking like it's going to end anytime soon. We have a lot of stressors coming along with that. Here in the United States, we have the recent racial justice movement that is seeking to create change. Of course, that is long overdue. And just to keep things interesting, we have a presidential election coming up in a few weeks.
Why not?
But why not?
Let's throw that in there.
Woo, oh my gosh, it is a lot to deal with. Just that right in and of itself is so much. And all this has happened to pile up on top of each other. And so many people are struggling to figure out how to cope with all this uncertainty. So as I talk tonight, I'm going to do my best to stay away from the word normal. You know, that's a word that's come up a lot over the last 6-7 months. I also don't like that particular word because it has some meanings that can leave people feeling abnormal, and that doesn't work for me. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go with the word appropriate. So right now, it is appropriate to feel overwhelmed, tired, edgy, down in the dumps, or blue. You might feel like eating a whole bunch of junk food and watching Netflix nonstop. Maybe you want to scour everything in your house, clean up the closets and landscape the backyard. That's good too. Or you might be totally rocking the sourdough bread start. You might have remodeled your kitchen or written the great American novel. All of these responses to where we're at currently is really appropriate. And if you have the sourdough thing down, hats off to you because I haven't even tried. So what I'm going to focus on, as Sarah mentioned, is what responses to stress may lead you to seeking out support. So as Sarah mentioned just a moment ago, 2 of the most common conditions that people may experience in reaction to stress are anxiety and depression. Some of the symptoms of anxiety that can come up can be constant and uncontrolled worry. And that can be just continuing to worry about one thing, or it can be all those things. Now, again, it's appropriate to have worry, particularly if you're struggling financially, as so many people are, and to worry about our health and all the other things that we talked about that are happening right now. Muscle tension can also be something that's really hard to deal with, and it can be an indicator of anxiety, which means all your muscles are tight and you have a really difficult time relaxing them. Sometimes you don't get any relief from that until you go to sleep. You might have difficulty relaxing. So maybe Netflix is something you kind of zone out on normally. Oh, I did it normally. Previously, maybe that's a better way to say it. But it's just not working for you anymore. You might feel really tired or fatigued most of the time. You could be really irritable, and you could have difficulty concentrating. You could be working on a script and have difficulty focusing on where you left off, or you're in an edit and you just totally can't remember what the person next to you said. You may have a disruption in your sleep. You could have difficulty falling asleep. That could be difficulty staying asleep, and or waking up and not being able to go back to sleep again, or waking up super early. A more problematic symptom of anxiety is what sometimes people call an anxiety attack or panic attack. A person could experience difficulty breathing. They feel like they can't get their breath. They might notice their heartbeat feels faster, like their heart's beating really quickly. They might feel sweaty. They might shake. They might experience some numbness or tingling in their body, and they might feel dizzy. And some other things that can show up are an upset stomach, and some people actually get such an upset stomach that they vomit, and then there's concerns that they feel like they're going crazy. So those are some of the things that, some of the more common things that we look at with anxiety. Depression is going to have some overlap. Of course, we probably are more familiar with depression in terms of people feeling down, sad, or depressed most of the time. Sometimes people have a feeling of hopelessness or a sense that there's just no future. They might have a lack of energy or fatigue most days of the week, and that's similar to anxiety that way. Some difficulty with concentrating, or they may feel really, really indecisive. Another symptom of depression can be a loss in things that people used to enjoy. So, and again, we have to take that with the current situation because there are things that are difficult or we're not able to do right now. You can also have a disruption of sleep. It could be, again, difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, and waking up and not being able to go back to sleep again. Could be waking up early. And some folks tend to sleep a lot when they feel depressed. So they can sleep 10, 12 hours a day and still wake up just feeling really drained and fatigued.
I know a lot of teenagers that can do that too.
They are really good at that. Absolutely, yes. So I remember reading on some article, I can't remember where it was, but something on my iPad, where someone was saying it's really common right now to want to eat a lot of carbohydrates because it does give us a change in our neurochemistry that feels really good when we're stressed. So again, that can be a really appropriate response. When we see a consistent change in appetite, excuse me, where people really just don't feel like eating very much, then that can be an indicator that somebody's struggling with feeling depressed. Some people might want to eat a lot of carbs, sweets, and fatty foods. And again, we can have a certain amount of that where it's appropriate, but if that's all that somebody is really finding appealing for a long period of time, then that can be another sign that it might be something to be paying attention to. A person's weight can change. They might gain weight, as you can imagine from what I just said, or they could lose it without trying. Thoughts may seem to kind of struggle to the surface. You might just have a really hard time focusing, and your body can seem really sluggish. So that can be indicated by not just how you're feeling, but other people might notice that you seem to be moving more slowly or that your thoughts are coming more slowly. You may experience feelings of worthlessness or excessive or inappropriate guilt. And the most concerning symptom of depression is thoughts of suicide. And this can range from any number of things. This can start off with something like, it'd just be better off if I wasn't here, if I wasn't born. And that might progress to thinking about some type of way of hurting yourself without a specific plan or a specific plan for dying by suicide. One of the most important things that I can share with you tonight is please seek help if you're thinking in any way about hurting yourself or if you're thinking you want to kill yourself. If this is the case, it is really important to talk to somebody right away. The National Suicide Prevention Lifeline is at 800-273-8255, and we will have that on a slide later on in the presentation. Some folks don't like to talk to somebody, especially younger kids who are on their phones. They like to text, and there is also a text crisis line, which is 741-741. And my understanding is when you use that, you'll send a text, they'll send you a little automatic text back saying, thank you for connecting with us, or hello, or something like that. And then they will be connecting you with a counselor that you can talk to. The research on suicide has shown that most people plan and act upon a suicidal thought within 19 minutes or less. So unfortunately, we've had several celebrities, people who are prominent in local and national communities who've committed suicide in recent years, and there's not a note. And that's thought why we may not see that is because that can happen really quickly. So that's why I would urge you, if you're having that type of thought, to not hesitate to reach out so that you can get some support. We'll have some other local community resources as well later on in the presentation so that you'll have some ideas about who you can talk to. And of course, if there is an immediate danger and maybe you're just not in that place where you're able to think about accessing those phone numbers, you can always call 911 or go to the hospital if that's necessary.
Trina, can I ask you a quick question about that?
Absolutely, Sarah.
Okay. So, have you ever seen any research that suggests that if I ask you if you're feeling suicidal, that that's going to then plant the idea or cause you to commit suicide?
That's a really good question. And the research actually says the opposite of that. It says that talking about suicide, asking about if someone is feeling like they would want to hurt or kill themselves, does not plant, I'm just going to use that word because sometimes that's the word that I've heard used. It doesn't plant that in someone's mind as an idea. The idea is already there. So we're just starting to acknowledge, or by saying it, we are acknowledging that that's something that's going on. It can give an opportunity for folks to open up and talk about it. And I've heard interviews with suicide survivors who've said, yeah, that would be really helpful to have people just be really straight about it, even though it's something that makes us very uncomfortable to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Katrina.
Absolutely. So that's obviously a situation when we'd want to reach out and seek help. In the world of psychology and psychiatry, what we look at is when things become a problem, when they become impactful on you on a day-to-day basis. So as I mentioned earlier, it's really appropriate to experience some or many of the things that I talked about and those symptoms that I just outlined. And if you're finding that you're experiencing difficulty managing those general day-to-day tasks, and these are the basic things, right? Like getting out of bed in the morning, that's definitely a challenge for some folks when they feel depressed. Now, I'll be the first to admit getting the laundry done, not top of my list of favorite chores. But if you find like a couple weeks have gone by and you don't have the energy to do a load of laundry and you need clean clothes, again, that might be a good indicator that you're really starting to have some struggles. Taking a shower. Again, people are kind of pushing showers off since we're working from home. If we're lucky, a lot of the time I've heard, again, news stories about this, like we're not using as much water or as much shampoo. But if it's a time where you're like, hey, I really would like to take a shower, but you don't feel that you have the energy, that would be a good indicator that you might be having a hard time. You might, as I mentioned earlier, find that your work is impacted by fatigue, difficulty concentrating, or other issues. You might find that your social relationships with family and friends are strained because you're really cranky and short-tempered, or you might find that you're avoiding them because it just takes too much energy to try and interact with them. Another thing about, that you want to possibly take into consideration when thinking about seeking help is any other types of problematic behaviors you might be experiencing. So it's not uncommon when somebody's struggling with a mental health challenge to try and get relief with substance use or another coping strategy. And although at first that can be really helpful, sometimes that can become a challenge in and of itself. So for example, if someone's having trouble sleeping, they might decide, well, I'm going to just have another glass of wine. Or I have some leftover painkillers from the dentist, and that'll help me fall asleep tonight. And that might work, as I say, in the short term, but sometimes that can create another problem because they start needing those substances to continue to feel relaxed or being able to go to sleep. Some people might start to exercise to get rid of those feelings of anxiety and tension, but could start to do that in a compulsive way that starts to impact their daily schedule. So if you notice some of those things are difficult to change or stop if you would like to, again, that can be a signal that it's time to reach out and find somebody that can offer you some support. Disordered eating can also be a strategy that to cope with stress. That can involve overeating or binging and purging, which we know as bulimia and anorexia are both serious health issues. And those would be things where we would ask you to reach out and get help right away because they can place somebody in in danger of severe health complications. And as you know, I can't stress enough, I tell clients multiple times a day how often the pandemic and how much the pandemic is impacting all of us. And if you've had a job loss or you've had your hours get cut, that's really, really challenging. Many people are feeling guilty and useless after a job loss. I hope you haven't lost anyone to the virus. And if you have, I am very, very sorry. But there is also the complication of grief too that can be really, really difficult. So that can be another thing that might lead you to seek some support too. Grief can show up like depression, but it has its own set of complications and challenges to deal with. And sometimes just talking to somebody to kind of sort that out can be helpful. There's a few other things I just want to note as you think about your own history and where these stressors right now may impact you. If you've had a history in the past of depression, anxiety, or another condition, you may be at a higher risk for recurrence of those issues. It's also true for if you've had a substance use issue or any type of struggles with addictive behaviors in the past. Eating disorders are difficult to manage at the best of times, and the stressor we talked about can very easily trigger a recurrence. I heard a story on NPR about a woman who's having some issues with not being able to get the food that she normally would because, of course, we've had supply chain issues, and how that was really triggering for her, bringing up issues with her previous struggles with an eating disorder. Also, if you have a trauma history, that would include experiences with sexual abuse, domestic abuse, or any other type of relational trauma, military service. Extra stress can certainly make that more challenging to deal with. So you're like, okay, well, what do I do now? And obviously, when you have a therapist talking to, we would say, well, seek out somebody to seek some support. So we are going to start off by, there's going to be a couple of links for self-tests for anxiety and depression you can take home. This is a lot to digest, I realize that. And that can give you a little time to sit with the information and see if it applies to you. Some folks like to fill those out and take them with them to say, hey, I took this test and these are the things that I'm experiencing. So I'm just going to wrap up by sharing a few tips with you. In my experience, I've been a client and a therapist. So firstly, as a therapist and as a previous client, I would say find somebody that you're comfortable with. Not every therapist and every client is a good fit. I've experienced that in both chairs. And the thing that's really challenging about that is it can keep you from getting to the heart of what brought you into therapy if you're just not feeling like this is the right match for you. You can interview therapists before you commit to working with them. Most will offer a phone call consultation for free, and you can ask questions and get a sense of who they are. We're talking to film and television women and people, and I'm sure your interviewing skills are great. So like, get your questions ready and just let them, know what you have questions about. I suggest maybe looking at 2 or 3 different people that you're interested in, just so if that first person you meet with isn't the right match for you that you were hoping, you can have another person lined up. So money, right? That's a real challenge right now, and especially for freelancers. I know you're struggling as it is before we had the financial impact from the pandemic. So that doesn't mean that you can't necessarily get help if you don't have health insurance. Many therapists will offer a sliding scale for those who are struggling financially, and know that there has been an outreach in that regard in terms of the pandemic. So you can always look and talk to them about that. There's also several local agencies that offer low or no cost services depending on your financial situation. Now, as a therapist, I know not everybody likes therapy. It's not the best fit for everyone. So I just wanted to offer a few other ideas. There's 12-step groups for so many different issues. Of course, we know them best for substance abuse, but there's also things like Overeaters Anonymous and things for gambling and relationship issues. If any of those happen to be a fit, that will be a great thing to utilize. Google can help you find those meetings. A lot of them are virtual right now. Some people don't like the 12-step approach, don't feel it's a good fit. And Smart Recovery is an alternative approach to substance use disorders. That's different than 12-step. We'll have a link to that a little bit later. That also has virtual meetings. Another resource that I can suggest is your church, synagogue, or temple that you may be part of. Sometimes these organizations have counselors available, or if not, they might have some resources for you. So I think that about covers what I have to share tonight, Sarah. I know that I just want to share with everybody again, we're all struggling to make sense of what's happening right now. I know I have difficulty remembering things, and I'm like, I know I said this, I know I wrote this down, I can't for the life of me find it. I call it pandemic brain. That's my term for it. So definitely we do have a lot of appropriate reactions right now. I hope this gives folks some information about what could be a problematic issue for them and how to potentially look for some help. And I hope you find what I shared tonight helpful.
Thank you so much, Katrina. And we are going to have, for everyone who's watching, we're going to have some slides of additional resources, and we're going to get, into those services a little more in depth here a little later in our talk. I did have a couple questions for you.
Absolutely.
I know that there's a lot of stigma still around mental health. And would you say, or how often would you say you see somebody kind of come in with symptoms of depression or anxiety?
I would say most folks that I see have one, the other, or, and I didn't mention this during the presentation, both. Oftentimes those can overlap, which is really challenging. It's difficult enough to have those symptoms, but when they overlap, it can be really confusing. So yes, I think, I don't know if I could say a percentage, but a very, very high one. I'd say in the 90s.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes folks will come in for relationship issues, but oftentimes that can lead to some of those symptoms too. And even if it's not what we would consider diagnosable, it's still impacting what they feel on a day-to-day basis.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying it's a pretty common
very
diagnosis.
Common. This isn't the best analogy, but it's one that pops to mind, is depression is considered the common cold of psychology work because it is so common.
Mm-hmm. When you were talking about anxiety, you mentioned like one of the symptoms being heart racing. Have you ever had, people you work with say they needed medical attention because of that, or they went to the ER?
That's a great question.
What's been your experience with that?
That's a really good question. And sometimes people who have those panic attack symptoms do end up going to the ER because it's often mistaken for a heart attack. I think it's a little while since this movie came out, but as good as it gets when Jack Nicholson goes to the hospital because he thinks it's a funny
movie.
yeah, it's a funny scene. And I'm sure it's a huge relief to folks to find out, oh, it's not a physical condition, but then there's, oh, what do I do about these panic attacks? So sometimes people do seek out medical attention, and I would encourage that. It would be really great if you're able to check in with a physician just to make sure everything's okay and make sure there's no underlying issues physically, but definitely that then follow up with somebody that can help support you in sorting that out.
Great. Well, before we started, I had some questions submitted, so I'm going to turn to those questions now. And the first question that I have from Brad in Overland Park is, what would you say is the most commonly missed symptom for anxiety and depression?
Oh, that's a really good question. I would say one of the most overlooked symptoms is kind of a low-lying feeling of being down in the dumps. There is a particular diagnosis for depression that is not the depression that we might be most familiar with, which is called major depressive disorder, which is where we see people who are feeling really down and their functioning is really impacted. A lot of people can show up with a milder version of that. And it may not be as impactful as the other symptoms are. And some folks aren't even aware that it's really that big a problem for them. But that tends to be my experience of what is often missed is that low lying, just not feeling 100%.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Hope that helps, Brad. The next question that I have is from Cindy in Prairie Village. And she asks, I know we said we weren't going to use the word normal, but she's asking, when is it considered kind of normal and when should I be worried?
Yeah, great question. So I would say when you are noticing these things are impacting what you're able to do and how you want to do it, if it's impacting your relationships, it's not unusual or inappropriate to snap at your partner or your kids, or maybe even a coworker at times right now. But if that gets to a point where it's negatively impacting your relationship because you feel irritable all the time, it's impacting your work because you have difficulty concentrating, you're not able to sleep, and this goes on for, I'd say, at least a couple weeks, then you might want to reach out and talk to somebody and get some support.
Okay, fantastic. Did we have anyone else that had any questions or comments about this before we move on to our next presenter? Okay, Well, thank you so much, Katrina. We might come back to you. You never know. But
Sounds
thank you
good.
for all the useful information. And hopefully that resonates with people who might be asking the question, is this something that I really need to be worried about? Or is this just the common, day-to-day blah?
Great.
Okay,
Sarah.
thank you. All right, our next presenter is Crystal Ships. Hi, Crystal.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you so
Hello,
much.
everybody.
Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Crystal will be talking about self-care tools and tips to decrease symptoms and also to promote wellness during these uncertain times. Crystal is a licensed professional counselor and certified health coach in the state of Kansas. She has a Master's of Arts degree in counseling from Weber University in St. Louis, Missouri, and a Bachelor's of Arts degree from Harding University in Arkansas. She specializes in creating self-worth and fostering self-compassion for adults of all ages. Thank you so much for being with us tonight, Crystal.
You are so welcome. It's very good to be here with all of you. Tonight, I kind of want to talk about some coping strategies that we're trying and that aren't working, and maybe why that is. So,
Yes.
I, like my colleagues here, we've kind of been on the front lines as well in this pandemic. And there's just some few observations I'd like to share as we work on self-care. I think a lot of us are really good at caregiving for others and maybe not so great about caregiving for us. So when it comes to our coping strategies, we learned those early on in life, I feel like. So maybe you were an avoider. Maybe if you knew mom's in a bad mood, I'm just going to stay in my room. Right? Or maybe you were one that kind of tried to numb things. If you were like me, maybe you were double fisting some Little Debbie snacks or something, in your room when you were feeling, conflict or feeling down or feeling some sad or depressing emotions. Maybe you did placating or pleasing or peacemaking behaviors like smoothing things over, right? Maybe if there was distressing emotions, the first thing you had to do was to try to smooth it out. So I think we learned these things early on. Checking out is another coping strategy. Like maybe you were a kid that always spent the night at someone else's house because being at home was hard. Or maybe throwing yourselves into other things. Like maybe you didn't make the team, so you're going to buckle down on your schoolwork, right? So even as a child, we learn when things are tough, there's a way to cope that feels okay and feels familiar. And we do this because nobody wants to feel distressing emotions, right? American society, which is the only one I've ever lived in, is constantly looking for ways to just not feel this. I don't want to feel this right now. So if we're the tiniest bit warm, we go push the thermostat down. If we're the tiniest bit hungry, we run to the fridge. If we are the tiniest bit bored, we pick up our phone. If you want a real wake-up call, there's a little app that will tell you how many times a day you pick up your phone. And for many of us, it's in the hundreds. So it's interesting what we will do to not feel bored or sad or uncomfortable in some way. But when COVID hit, and quarantine happened, we got an onslaught of these difficult emotions, right? Fear, dread, uncertainty. We had conflicting news stories from whatever source you like to watch.
So
we had
confusing.
I know, right? We also had some reckless optimism, which was like that it's not that bad, it's going to go away. It's fine. But we all went searching for something to do to shut it off, right? The painful emotions. So kind of like what Katrina said, some of us, maybe we were sober, but we started drinking again. Right? And maybe some of us had a really great exercise routine, but then we kind of fell back into those couch potato ways, right? Maybe it was drug use. Maybe we were sober from that and started using that again. Maybe we were in a healthy eating pattern. Maybe we were rocking that paleo diet and then we, kind of jumped into the carbs with the pizza and the wine, coping behavior. All of those are numbing behaviors. And I think we gravitate to what we know, what feels familiar. So some people, and Katrina hit on this too, some people just didn't want to be alive anymore, right? They wanted to check out. And so the rates of calls to suicide hotlines tended to go up. So there's a continuum of coping strategies. I think some are fairly healthy, some are really unhealthy, but we're going to talk about that as we go. I see couples, I see individuals, I see families in my practice, and some couples had gone for years doing really well, managing really awful marriages by never being together.
Mm-hmm.
So that maybe one would go on a business trip and one would go on a girls' night, or they would just keep themselves busy with kids' activities. They were all suddenly forced to be in the same four walls, day after day, month after month at this point, right? So some marriages haven't survived because during this quarantine, they've had to kind of face the music. What's really going on here? What have we not been addressing? So why do we gravitate towards certain coping strategies? Well, it's because they're familiar and because they've always worked. We thought. They do work, as Katrina said, in the short term. For a while, they make us feel better. It kind of takes the edge off. But the problem is that we can't outrun, outsmart, avoid, or numb reality for too long, right? We have to continue then to repeat the cycle to avoid sitting with the feelings. So in counseling, we call this distress tolerance, building our tolerance for distress, right? The ability to sit with distressing feelings and situations and not act out in a way that's destructive to ourselves or our relationships. So people who do this well, we call them resilient, right? They're able to hear distressing things or survive distressing things and regulate their emotions and kind of roll with the punches. The problem with COVID and quarantine, I feel, is that we are all worn out from having to do this for an extended period of time. As Katrina mentioned, we've had, well, first of all, the death toll keeps rising from COVID. We have social justice or injustice issues that have been raised and that have been long overdue. We have an upcoming election. We've had upheavals in our home and social lives. People are homeschooling for the first time ever. People working from home for the first time ever. New or brought to the surface conflicts in our interpersonal relationships, as I mentioned. And also not being able to see our coworkers and enjoy that camaraderie on a daily basis. A lot of us adults aren't really feeling like we're doing much adulting right now. We're doing a lot of taking care of kids, taking care of other people, but not able to have those same outlets. And it's been too much for too long. So we have distress tolerance fatigue, all of us, for different reasons, because we all have different stories. One thing remains the same, and that's one I want to hit on real quick, is called the concept of the locus of control. Okay, so for people who have the feeling of an external locus of control, that means the world is in control of how I feel. And for people who have an internal locus of control, it's I'm in control of how I feel and what I'm doing, right? So we can't control COVID, like as a pandemic, but we can control our personal response to COVID. We can wear a mask, we can social distance, we can work remotely, we can take precautions. We can't control others' response to these social injustices, but we sure can control ours. We can march, we can send letters, we can call Congress, we can call out racism and bigotry in our own lives. And please vote. We can't control some of the upheavals in our homes. Some of our school systems are shut down, and we can't control that. But we can give ourselves grace and do our best and focus on what's truly important, and that is the emotional climate in our homes right now. This is a fun one. We can't control our partner, but we can control our response to our partner, what boundaries are set and what we allow. Okay, so maybe A few sessions of therapy or coaching would be beneficial to kind of navigate some of this, especially the relational issues. Katrina mentioned this as well, but in addition to being a therapist, I'm also a certified health coach and have helped many people get to a healthy weight. And I built a health coaching business during a pandemic with people who realized their locus of control was within, right? They couldn't control the outside world. They couldn't control anything else going on, but they could control what they chose as far as food options. They decided they wanted to come out of this quarantine better. I've counseled individuals who wanted to come out of this quarantine season healthier emotionally and relationally, right? So that controls from inside. I've helped people who thought they just wanted to check out, use those old patterns, but they found a way to make their lives worth living. So the takeaways for me that I hope that you take away from tonight is it's important to let yourself feel whatever it is you're feeling without judgment. Okay, maybe you have a day, as I call it, a blender day, where you feel sad and happy and stressed and frustrated and lonely and tired and overwhelmed. And that's just 10 minutes of your day.
And I was going to say,
right?
a day, I feel that in
Yeah.
5 minutes, like all
Exactly.
that in 5 minutes.
Exactly. But whatever it is, allow yourself to truly feel that and don't try to stuff it or numb it or avoid it. Also understand that your worth is not tied to achievement. So maybe you have lost your job, or maybe your job looks different, or maybe you're a homeschool mom and you sure as hell do not want to be a homeschool mom, right? Your worth is not tied to that achievement or that success right now or ever. Holding those emotions inside and numbing them out is like trying to hold a beach ball under the water. Have you ever tried to do that? You can only hold it down for so long. It's going to come back up and hit you in the face. Mm-hmm. So you can't control everything, but the things you can control are important and are going to help you remain mentally healthy during this sustained period of crisis. So maybe you have a maladaptive coping strategy. Maybe you have had things that you've tried that haven't worked. Maybe you have to try some new things, and connect with others. I'm so glad you guys have this group. Hopefully you are able to connect with one another for whatever way that you're needing. But that's really all I wanted to share tonight.
Okay, great. Crystal, you talked about distress tolerance skills.
Mm-hmm.
Why do some people have them and some people don't?
Well, I feel like distress tolerance is, or a lack of it, can be a trauma response, right? Okay. If things in our life have been, if we have wounds that haven't been healed, we may be unable to tolerate tough things. Maybe we've had to tolerate a whole lot of tough things in our life, and we just don't know how to do it. We've never been taught, we've never been told and trained on how to sit with painful emotions. So I do believe that it can definitely be a trauma response, for sure.
Is it a situation where if I don't have them by a certain age, I won't be able to get them?
Oh, no. I always believe that as long as you have a pulse, you're able to change. So, I have clients in my client load who are 75 years old who are still doing some of this work. So it's never too late.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Had a couple questions sent in prior to tonight. So Sarah from Independence wants to know, what's the most common excuse for continuing maybe a behavior that
Sure.
I think is helping me but isn't?
It's easier. Mm-hmm. It's easier to stay in a bad habit, a bad way of coping than it is to learn something new and try something healthy. Fear holds us back. The fear of trying something new, the fear of failure. What if we try this and it doesn't work, then what? Mm-hmm. There can be a lot of reasons why.
Okay. The next one is from Megan in Raytown. And she wants to know, how do you approach someone who you might see displaying these behaviors? How do you have a conversation with them about it?
That's a great Great question. I go back to the old saying, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So, if you have a good relationship and a good rapport with this person, so someone that knows that you care about them, it may just be a matter of, hey, I really care about you. I've noticed maybe you have been sleeping more or distancing more, isolating, and I'm worried about you, and I want to see what we can do to make you feel your best. So I do think if it's someone that you just barely know, trying to kind of form those bonds, that rapport, is going to help your words have more weight, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Is there ever a wrong way to do it?
I think anything that's going to have that smacks of judgment, like, hey, I've seen you put on some weight during this pandemic, that's probably not a great lead in. Anything that makes you seem like you have it all figured out, any way that we wouldn't want to be talked to, I would definitely not start that way, for sure.
So kind of the golden rule of, treat others the way you would want to be treated. We do that with language as well, on how I approach someone. Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Crystal. Does anyone who's watching have any questions for Crystal before we move on to Kate? Okay. I might be coming back to you, Crystal. Thank you so much. Okay, now we're moving to our last presenter of the evening, Kate Heinen, and I'm really pleased to introduce Kate because she is actually a new addition to our board of directors and will be serving during the 2020 through 2022 term. So hello, Kate. Good to see you. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about Kate. Kate Heinen received her master's in social work from UMKC and her undergraduate degree in film studies and American studies from KU. Although her social work practice is focused on community activism and policy interventions for systemic change, Kate works on call for the Johnson County Mental Health, providing mental health crisis intervention services, and has served local neighborhood organizations, particularly in areas related to community mental health through the Center for Neighborhoods. Prior to working at the Metropolitan Organization to Counter Sexual Assault, also known as MOXA, where she serves as the coordinator of community engagement. Kate served as the domestic violence and child abuse victim advocate for the Kansas City Prosecutor's Office and provided crisis intervention services for Rose Brooks Center Emergency Shelter and Safe Housing Program. Kate is a hobbyist filmmaker focused on social justice docs. Thank you so much, Kate, for being here and sharing your expertise.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I have some slides. Oh, here they come. Cool.
Ooh, all right. Take it away.
Help prompt me. So yeah, I want to talk about self-care in times of stress. And I think we're going to have some repetition from what's been said, but there's also going to be new information, so stick around.
Repetition just brings it home.
Oh, totally. So for a lot of us, well, for many of us, self-care doesn't come easily. We're maybe used to caring for others, or I know a lot of my friends who work in production, they're really into like the hustle and like, they're kind of like have a bustling activities list every day, and they don't always take time to listen to themselves and practice self-care. So one acronym that can be really helpful is HALT for your health. I love it. It makes me think of that song, like Stop in the Name of Love. I'm like, you should halt for your health. If you're feeling hungry, angry, lonely, or tired, that is your body, your mind telling you that you have to stop. Stop and notice that and take care of yourself. And like what Crystal said, it's not about not feeling distressing emotions. It's about mitigating the amount of disruption that those feelings might have. And so that's what self-care in wellness practice is to me, is about feeling things and then taking enough care of ourselves to where like they're not, mowing through our lives, those feelings. So hungry, like that's something that you can stop and do something about. You can get a snack, angry, you can do something that you use for stress relief or anger relief. Or even sometimes it's just reminding yourself enough to, like, if you're, depending on what you're angry about, like if you're angry about another person, I'm thinking especially about times in quarantine right now, when we're sharing those four walls with people who we're maybe kind of done sharing four walls with. When we're feeling angry, just reminding ourselves that we're only responsible for our own behavior, not other people's behavior. And then that can help us respond to things. And then loneliness, making sure we're noticing what loneliness looks like for a lot of us, which for some of us, this may be the first time that we're really recognizing, oh, that's what loneliness really feels like. And so maybe noticing that within ourselves and connecting with others. And then when we're feeling tired, sleeping, but then, like what was mentioned earlier, noticing when we're maybe sleeping too much. And so, yeah.
The fine line between self-care and self-sabotage.
Yeah, absolutely. There can be. And then practicing self-compassion. So notice, I think it's difficult to practice self-care if you're not compassionate with the feelings that are coming up for yourself. And then also how we talk to ourselves matters. And so this time away from distractions in our lives, for some of us, for some of us, we're like homeschooling kids and we're like, what do you mean away from distractions? But for some of us, our evenings aren't as busy. We have a lot more alone time with ourselves. And if you're spending a lot more time with yourself and you maybe have never been that kind to yourself, that's an issue. And so that's something to notice and work on, is practicing self-compassion. Also, in the same vein with addressing what maybe keeps coming up for you. If this is a time of reflection and you're noticing that certain childhood traumas are coming up, or certain distressing habits that maybe you've always wanted to work on, but now things have kind of slowed down enough that you're noticing that this is a big deal. Now is a good time to address those things that keep coming up for you. That's your body and your mind telling you, hey, no, this is really an issue. And so not ignoring that is a good self-care practice to introduce. And then weaving wellness into your life. So we're not like hearing wellness tips and things and thinking like, oh yeah, I'll totally try that if things get too bad. It's like, no, now is the time to try some of those things, some of those wellness things you've been hearing about. We're 6 months into this pandemic. It's a collective trauma, and there's other layered stresses that we've talked about. It's an election year. We may be homeschooling children. We may have new things with our job. All of those things layered means that we need to be introducing wellness on a regular basis and not being like, well, when I get stressed, I'll do this. It's like, no, like to keep yourself from getting to that point, keep wellness as a daily practice. I have more slides. I don't know how to get to the next slide. There we go. So some everyday wellness tips for how to do this is to establish a morning and evening routine. Maybe you've never had a morning and evening routine before. Maybe it's always been that you wake up and you're checking your work email on your phone the second you wake up. There's not a boundary there. Now is a good time to roll into your mornings and take like a good block of time, especially for those of us who have small children. It's good to have, it can be the only barrier that you get between like you and your kids waking up is early in the morning. So establishing a morning routine, you can make it a sacred time if you want. And interweave, I don't think I mentioned spiritual practice, but you can weave in some spiritual practice if that's something that you use, if that's something that's helpful for you. And then also having evening routines. And a lot of this is around kind of the sacredness of sleep. A lot of us may be experiencing sleep disruption for the first time in our lives, or maybe we've frequently had sleep disruption and now it's real rampant because of the collective trauma and everything going on. And so having a morning routine and an evening routine can create like a buffer when you wake up and a buffer before you go to sleep to really allow yourself to soften into restoration for your sleep, or to come out of that with enough of a barrier to where you're not like just throwing yourself into your new work from home schedule. Which is also, having a good morning routine brings us to our point about boundaries. Is that some folks find themselves working from home now, and they're like, okay, well, if I'm working from home, does that mean, and I'm always home, does that mean that I'm always working? Like, where's that boundary line with my colleagues or with my work? And it is always okay to assert boundaries with others. Boundaries are a healthy thing. And, you know, if you need some language around that, it can be as simple as saying, you know, actually, this is a boundary that I have, that I don't check email until 9 a.m. Or I stop checking email at 5 p.m. And so just sharing that that's a boundary is important. And then when Katrina and I had spoke earlier, she brought up a great point around boundaries with the news that can be specific to folks who work in the film and media industry. Is there can be a feeling of like, I need to be informed with the news all the time because the news and the media is my job. We can kind of feel that way anyway too. And so maybe people are less apt to assert a boundary with how they're receiving the news. And that can either be how much news you receive, or when you read the news, how much you allow yourself, like a daily allotment of the news. I have switched from viewing the news, because I'm a visual person, to reading the news. That has helped me as like a good boundary. And so those are some important boundaries to have. And then just because you live with folks doesn't mean you can't assert boundaries too. It's just a good reminder. If you needed a permission slip to assert boundaries with people who you're kind of always with, here's your permission slip.
Would you consider even setting a boundary with yourself? I know so many more of us are working from home, to like create like a boundary around space, like this is my work area versus, you know, I'm at the kitchen table, so I'm still part of the house. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I read a great article. I wish I had referenced it, or I wish I could reference it. There is, having a set office space, or if space is tight, just a set space that's not your bedroom, where you do work can be great. And also, if you have, a lot of people have a work laptop that's separate from their personal laptop, so only using your work laptop for work, not using your personal laptop for work. I have a friend who was struggling with working from home, and something that was really helpful was she would wake up in the morning, make her coffee, and kind of keep her morning routine, which was to go for a quick drive. And so she didn't like drive all the way to the office and back. She didn't do that, but she like got in the car with her coffee, listened to the same news program she used to listen to on her drive to work, drove around just a little bit, and then came back to her house and started her workday. And that was a good enough of a boundary in her mindset, so that she could start work and still keep some morning routines that were important to her. Yeah. Something that's also important to do, that's an everyday wellness tip, is to calendar things to look forward to. And I don't mean like things after, like when this is all over, right? I felt like I and everybody else back in April and May were like planning our trips to Europe in September when this is all over. And when I mean calendar things to look forward to, I mean something to look forward to every day, or every week. And these are likely going to be things that you have to create. And so it could be that you're looking forward to a treat. It could be that you're hopefully not, a bad coping skill, but that you're looking forward to a treat. Or maybe you're looking forward to reading a book that came in the mail. Or maybe you're looking forward to, I know I've been looking forward to artists who are releasing like tiny desk concerts or new album releases. I've been putting those on my calendar. I would never in pre-COVID days put that like Fiona Apple was releasing a new album on my calendar, but that went on my calendar this year because we need to have things that we look forward to. And she hadn't made an album in 8 years, so that was really important. Anyway, and then making sure that we nourish ourselves with whole foods. Crystal spoke to that as well, but the more research that gets done, the more that it's like the mind-body connection is real. Diet and exercise play a huge role in your brain health and your emotions. And so by exercise, I don't mean like you have to go to the gym, because we know the gym can be a hot spot, but stretching, walking outside, you can combine nature. There's a lot of great yoga videos online that you can do. Just something to get your body moving can be good, especially if you find yourself with anxiety too in your head. It's helpful to bring yourself back to your body. And then these are tips that are paired with apps that you can check out. And the apps are either free or super low cost. So one is deep breathing. We know that deep diaphragm breathing, it's almost, I think Bessel van der Kolk, he's a researcher out of the Trauma Center in Boston. And he asserts that it's not possible to feel anxious if you've taken, I think it's like 5 really deep breaths into your belly. He's like, you won't feel anxious if you do that. And so you can set a timer for deep breathing. You can have a cue for it. Like maybe if you're stopped at a red light, that's your cue for deep breathing. Or if you're taking your dog outside, that's your cue for deep breathing. That's a good way to weave it in. And that way it can become a routine practice. It can also just be something that you do as part of your routine for your morning or evening routines that we talked about. And there's an app, if you're not sure what diaphragm breathing is, or you haven't done that before, it's breathing all the way into your belly. Especially when we're anxious, we tend to take more shallow breaths. So there's a really great app called Breathe to Relax. There's also YouTube videos that focus a lot on breath work or breathing. So that's something that you can incorporate that's free and easy and hugely effective. And then mindfulness, which is coming back to the present moment. We can find ourselves, especially during this time, real pulled back into the past and maybe decisions that we made, like, oh, I should have taken that job there because they wouldn't have been impacted as much by the COVID losses. Or I should have, addressed this relationship or this issue earlier so that it wouldn't be such an issue now. So rather than getting pulled into the past or getting too extended into the future where we're like, if the election turns out this way, if this occurs, if this goes on for 6 months, what's going to happen? Being mindful to bring yourself back to the present moment so that you're, there's apps that can help you with this. I named several that I think are really great. Stop, Breathe, Think, Insight Timer, Calm, and Headspace. Those can help you keep you in the present. And so that way it can kind of become a habit to stay in the present and not let yourself get pulled back or get jutted forward. And then gratitude is huge. So taking time to notice and appreciate things. And I'm not saying like spiritually bypass, like, oh, I guess I should be grateful that I have a house, even though, I'm nervous about the mortgage payments or something. I mean, like there are things that you can be grateful for. And so taking time to notice and appreciate things, having a gratitude practice, people report that being very helpful to mitigate feelings of stress. And there's an app for that too. There's an app called Presently that will prompt you regularly to enter what you're grateful for that day at a time that you set. And then learning something new, which I know some of us might roll our eyes at that, being like, I'm so tired of learning new things. But it also plays in with something that you can look forward to, and a way that you can maybe even connect with others in a safe way. So you might try knitting, bike riding. There's also apps for that, like Duolingo, sourdough starters, just learning something new, something to look forward to. And then allowing for sensory distraction, or sensory soothing is really what I mean. So that kind of goes back to keeping you present, getting back into your body, having essential oils that you use, ASMR, which I'm blanking on what that stands for. But there's a bunch of YouTube videos online that if you type in ASMR, they're like sounds really close up to a microphone. And for some people, that's really soothing for them. And for other people, it drives them crazy, but it could be helpful for you. And so it's something to check out. Tea, journaling, etc. Like when I bring up ASMR or like things to try, this is the time when we're in this trauma right now and it's layered to just be throwing stuff at your mental wellness to see what sticks. Because we don't know, because there's so much that's uncertain right now and we're all kind of on marbles, that like now's the time, it's not later, it's now. So trying new things is super important and allowing for sensory soothing. And then connecting with others is huge. And whether that's online, socially distanced, through phone calls, keep connecting with people. That's gonna really mitigate feelings of loneliness. And then this is a wellness resource list. I think this portion of the slides you might put on our Facebook page or our website. But finding a therapist is something that we've talked about this evening. And maybe you have, I worked as an intake specialist for 3 years. And so I have like a real soft spot for knowing how hard it is for folks to find a therapist. If you have worked with a therapist in the past and you're like, oh, I did that. I did talk therapy. I met with a therapist. It didn't work. That just means that you met with a therapist and it didn't work. That doesn't mean like you tried therapy and it didn't work, because every therapist that you work with is different. You can, like we talked about earlier, you can interview them, you can get to know them. And then there's also different treatment modalities that you maybe haven't tried before. Maybe talk therapy, traditional talk therapy wasn't helpful, that maybe a DBT or a dialectical behavioral therapist might be helpful, or maybe a therapist who specializes in EMDR, or ketamine assisted therapy. There's a million different types of therapy out there that you might check out. And a good website to kind of help navigate that is psychologytoday.com. There's a find a therapist search tool, and you can actually click on the boxes for a therapist who takes your insurance, or who accepts cash payments. And if you want a therapist who has a certain gender, or if you want a therapist who has a certain specialty, you can click through that and it'll narrow down your search for a local therapist who meets your criteria. And that can be a helpful starting point if you just feel overwhelmed by the idea of finding a therapist. You can narrow that down. There's also, I think
it's like Katrina said, like, don't be afraid to look for a love connection. Not everybody is a good fit. And, that's a great resource to be able to kind of look for that fit. Because, I saw a really interesting research article one time that said, 80% of a person's success is dependent on the relationship they have with their therapist. Is this somebody that I trust? Is this somebody that I like? Regardless of what modality they might be using, that relationship is so important.
Yeah. Oh, it's everything, that therapeutic relationship and that sense of trust. And people put their profiles on psychologytoday.com, and that can be helpful too, to read someone's profile before.
Pictures.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Pictures. Mm-hmm. And then they also have some helpful articles on Psychology Today. Kind of, if you're wanting to check out a therapist, they have some good resources. Of course, your insurance provider's website is going to have some therapists. Therapyforblackgirls.com is a great website. There's, specific systemic issues and specific forms of oppression that the mental health community has long neglected for women of color. And so therapyforblackgirls.com addresses that and connects people with a therapist. And then KC-WIFT reached out to betterhelp.com. This is cool. And we asked what kind of discount they could offer KC-WIFT members, and they gave us a link that's 15% off discount off the first month of service for you. And BetterHelp.com it's video therapy, telehealth is what it's called, or telemental health. And so using that link, if you sign up for their subscription service, which can be helpful for budgeting too. I have a friend who uses BetterHelp, and they found that it was nice for budgeting to have like a monthly flat rate that they pay for therapy. But this will get you 15% off your first month, which is awesome.
What? BetterHelp is going to help our community? What? That is so wonderful. And, you know, Kate, you were very instrumental in setting that up. So thank you so much for doing that.
Yeah, no problem. And then when we were talking about noticing behaviors, maybe during the pandemic, you have went from like alcohol being your friend to like side-eyeing your glass of wine every night, where you're like, why is this becoming not such a great relationship? Or maybe I want to change or pay attention to my relationship with alcohol. There's some good resources online that are free for curbing alcohol use, or just exploring that if that's something that you've been thinking about. Remember, we talked about things coming up for us during this time of reflection. So alcoholexperiment.com, and then 1 year no beer. They have one that's less than 1 year. If 1 year of no beer sounds crazy, they have other timeframes. Then if you're healing from sexual assault or sexual abuse, there's MOXA, where Katrina and I both work. It's the Metropolitan Organization to Counter Sexual Assault. It's always a mouthful. And those services are all confidential, and they're offered at no cost. And that's when the therapy is focused on healing from sexual abuse, sexual assault. And that's for children, adults, adult survivors of childhood sexual abuse, and family members who've been impacted. And so that is a good resource to check out. It's a great resource to check out. And then healing from an abusive relationship, there's the hotline.org. There's 10 Metro serving domestic violence agencies in the Kansas City community. And the hotline is a national organization that, depending on your zip code, can connect you with the nearest domestic violence agency or intimate partner violence agency. Even if you just have questions about your relationship and whether it's crossed a line into something that's abusive, the hotline can help with that. And that's a free resource as well. And then we talked a little bit about disordered eating or eating disorders. And this is a local link that Katrina had shared with me, that's eatingdisorder.care. And I believe it has a network of a few different agencies locally that specialize in disordered eating and helping people heal and manage that. And then support for addictive behaviors. Katrina and Crystal both talked about some of these as well. There's Smart Recovery. There's always AA, which is something. And then there's also Smart Recovery. There's Recovery Dharma, which uses Buddhist principles for recovery. And then SheRecovers.org has a fee, but it's pretty small. And so that's a good resource. And that's She Recovers isn't just for alcohol use disorder, it's also for disordered eating as well, or other addictive behaviors. And then Tempest Recovery is kind of a cool, newer substance use recovery treatment modality. And they also have, I think they have a free program, and then they also have a priced out program that's pretty manageable. I think it's as low as like $8 per month, but that's something to check out as well. And then, Katrina had talked about self-assessment tools for anxiety and depression. You can go to adaa.org. They have a really great self-assessment tool that you can use. And they also had a pretty awesome list of COVID anxiety tips that could be good to check out with managing COVID anxiety around getting sick, or managing feelings of worry around family members getting sick, things like that. And then we put the Suicide Prevention Lifeline website and the number that Katrina had shared during the start of this. Mental Health America of the Heartland is local, and they also have some really great resources. And the National Alliance on Mental Illness is also local. And then most people don't know that we have something called Warm Lines in the Metro. And that is, that's a hotline that people can just call if they're like, I'm not feeling suicidal, but I need somebody to talk to. If somebody's like just wanting to combat loneliness, there's a line that they can call just to talk to somebody that's available weekdays. And then there's one that's available every evening. So that is a list of resources.
Okay.
It's a lot of information. Thanks for letting me
Yes.
fit all that in.
No, I think, frequently people feel like I don't know where to turn or what are my resources. And so it's great that you put that in all in one place, which we will have available for everyone on the KC WIFT website. If you need to be reminded of any numbers or websites. Couple questions for you, Kate.
Yeah.
Got a question from Kansas City. What would you say is the common length of time that a person can anticipate receiving treatment?
Receiving treatment for?
Let's say that it's part of that depression and anxiety that Katrina was talking about. Like if I wanted to start therapy, because, we have the BetterHelp that's, a resource and available, what would be a common length of time to be in therapy?
To be in therapy? Well, it varies by person and your relationship with your therapist. I also hate giving the response, it depends, but it feels like it's my most frequent response. We know that research tells us that people tend to feel, after somebody meets with a therapist that they connect with, they report feeling better in as few as 4 sessions. It's statistically better in as few as 4 sessions. A lot of people also self-report feeling better after just meeting with a therapist one time and feeling that relief of that safe space where they're able to share with a professional things that they've been harboring, feelings that have been coming up. Because usually by the time someone's reached out to a therapist, they've been carrying stuff for a while. And that's something to avoid. And so if your main drawback to reaching out for therapy is I'm going to be in therapy for years. I feel like I've heard that dramatically said just like that before. Not necessarily. You might feel
Forever.
yeah, or for forever. You can talk to your therapist about time limited treatment plans too. You can say, I would like to be in therapy for this amount of time working on these specific treatment goals. And that's a conversation you can have with your therapist and let them know.
The last question I have is from Liz in Lawrence. And she asks, how do I not feel guilty for doing self-care?
Oh, how do you not feel guilty? That's a feeling that I think that we're hearing more and more is people feeling guilty for practicing self-care. And the argument that I've heard people say is, well, you have to take care of yourself, otherwise you're no good to other people. And I don't always like that argument because self-care is for us. It's not necessarily for other people. If other people receive the byproduct of our self-care, that's great. But we also want to manage some of those feelings of guilt around self-care. And so how to prevent feeling guilty is know that it's absolutely necessary to surviving and thriving is self-care. That guilt may be a feeling that you have to manage around that, but that should not stop you from self-care.
Okay, great. Well, I'll open it up to see if we have any questions for Kate. It looks like we did get a general question. Can you ladies see that question on there? And I'll open it up to any of you to answer it. I think that Crystal might have touched on this a little bit already. But Katrina, Kate, the question is, if I have a partner, roommate, friend who I think might be suffering from depression, how would I approach them?
Kate, would you like me to touch on that?
Yeah, I was going to begin with just sharing that it's important to note your relationship with that person and then connecting with them and letting them know that you're here for them and having resources available. And again, not like what Crystal touched on, not, or being sure that you normalize those feelings of depression and anxiety and remind them how common it is and help to soften the stigma around it. Katrina, I don't know if you have stuff that you want to add as well.
I think those are all really great points. The other thing that might be helpful is just to point out what you're noticing, again, really gently. I really think what Crystal brought up about being, not judgmental is very appropriate and really helpful. But if you say something like, I noticed that you're sleeping a lot more than you used to, or you seem to be down, or your energy seems low, just, sharing with them your observations, that can sometimes open the door for that conversation. But your relationship, as Kate mentioned, better than anybody with that person. So find the way that you feel most comfortable. There are also lots of really great websites to check out that can offer some suggestions, like a script or some opening ways to address that. And you can, of course, use Google to help find that.
I also agree with the normalizing it. You might just draw from your own experience too. Back when I was, this age, I struggled with depression, and it looked a little bit like kind of what you're dealing with now. So if you can kind of take the stigma away in any way, drawing from your own experiences, that would be good.
And Crystal, what's the name of your practice if someone's interested in having some life coaching or marital therapy with you?
My website is mendedkc.com, and I do counseling and life coaching, as well as also a dating coach.
What's the difference between therapy and coaching?
The way that I describe it is life coaching is a little more about the here and now and the future, and counseling is a lot of times about the past. And kind of healing from things in the past. So that's a little bit, I think it's a lot, life coaching is almost like counseling light a little bit.
Great. I know some people might not be kind of clear on what would be the difference. How would I know if I wanted a life coach or a therapist?
Yeah, and that would just be a conversation for an intake session to see what the direction would go.
All right. Any other questions before we wrap up from our audience tonight? Okay. Well, hopefully everyone's been able to gain some insight, some resources, things to think about or look at. And I want to thank our panel for being here tonight and sharing their knowledge and their expertise in the area of mental wellness and self-care. Is there anything that you would like to say before we sign off?
Hey, Sarah. You guys can't see me. My name is Ashley Mayer. I am behind the scenes running the show. I just wanted to mention that we have selected 2 people at random for a care package that were donated for us tonight. And so I messaged privately who those 2 people are, and if you guys want to message me back in the chat with your email address, so we can send you those packages, just to kind of keep you guys anonymous as much as possible. So if you could do that, I would appreciate it. And then if you guys want to jump back to our webpage where we have the posted information, we will have the $15 membership for KC WIFT. We will also have that 15% discount, as well as all of those contact phone numbers and websites and all of that lovely information that these lovely ladies have provided available to you guys after this. So jump back in here within the next 12 hours or so, less than that probably, but that's all I have. I'm sorry you can't see me. My camera's not at the moment, so
Yes, the person behind the curtain. Thank you, Ashley, for being our technical support tonight, and we appreciate everyone participating and being here. Don't forget that we do have our October event in just a few weeks. It will be our first in-person event since March, where we will be having a scary movie night. All right, thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
you.